Hey, everybody, it's termination of a quorum. We have lots of members and I think we're good on a quorum. Adjustments to the agenda. The only thing, are you going to have an update on what we raised last, 2 months ago now on creating a new committee for the Madonic? And I don't know if that was taken up by the select board or.
That could be a town warrant item. You're talking about the agriculture item?
Yeah,
Yeah, that would be a town warrant item.
okay, because George is here and so it'd be a good time to rehash that maybe just a little bit.
Okay.
Any other adjustments to the agenda, folks? Good. Okay. We have no citizens, no citizen comments. That's true, which takes us to the chair report. And a couple of things to report on the food pantry. So food pantry was today. We distributed to 155 households, which again tied our record high. Made up of 399 folks, 118 children, 222 adults, and 59 seniors. So we're not seeing any kind of reduction or any kind of, kind of summer now. You think it would slow up a bit, but no, it's amazing. In fact, I did deliveries today. We delivered to a couple areas like Waldoboro Village and places like that. And when I came back, the line was actually out onto Friendship, out onto the road. So and that's before we even opened. I was like before 12. So we gotta, we gotta figure out what to do there. But anyway, the other kind of big news is there's a food pantry in Rockland called AIO. And I don't know what the A and the O, I forget all the time, but the I is interfaith. For whatever reason, I can remember that. But
Area Interfaith Outreach, I think.
there you go. And for many years now, they have taken on what used to be called the backpack program at Miller School. So a backpack program is a program where the kids at Miller School is the elementary school. So at Miller School, where on Friday afternoon after school, the kids would get a backpack full of food for the weekend, essentially. And it was made up of 2 breakfasts, 2 lunch and snacks and drinks and things like that. AIO I think they have like 22 schools that they do in Knox County. And Miller was the one outlier from Lincoln. And they'd made the determination that with the way their funding was going, that they could no longer support Miller School for this program. So we needed to find somebody who would support the Miller School program, and the Waldoboro Food Pantries decided to take that on. So that will be part of our purpose now moving forward. So
Can I interrupt you just for a second?
Yeah.
I did my write-in voting, and what is the town now subsidizing or providing?
pantry,
Yeah.
Occasionally through the I can't, what's the name of it? What is it?
Philbrook Fund?
Philbrook Fund. We have gotten a couple of like I think $1,500 out of the Philbrook Fund on occasion. That's not town funding though, that's Philbrook Fund.
So the funding that I was voting for.
We get 0 right now.
Okay, so the thing that I was voting.
That was the citizens petition that Jan's been
Yeah,
talking about.
okay.
So that is to get town of Waldoboro funding for the pantry, and it's $1,500 a month, $18,000 annually.
I voted for it.
Yeah, thank you. It represents about less than 1/4 of our food costs, not the van and gas and all that, just what we pay for food to distribute. That covers about 1/4.
So that will help a little bit.
It'll help a little bit. And we have a lot of months like this month where donations just we're running in the negative. So we have our annual appeal, which kind of gives us a block of money that we can kind of work away at. But we got a lot of big plans for the pantry, and running on a, having no money in the bank doesn't allow us to
Yeah.
kind of move forward, so this is one example, the Miller School program, AIO this year will continue to provide, and we're calling it, we got a new name for it. It's going to be called Miller Kids Weekend Food. So it's not going to be backpack and the way it works at these programs is any kid that wants it can get it. So there was an issue with bullying. So kids who had to qualify to get it were getting bullied by kids who didn't get it, obviously. So now we've made the determination that any kid that wants it can get it. There's no, you could be the richest kid in school or the poorest kid in school. It doesn't matter. If you want a sack of food on Friday afternoon, take home, it's yours.
And these are all pre-prepared.
Pre-prepared, right. So AIO will still continue to prepare the bags on Thursday. We'll come pick up all the bags and deliver them to Miller School. Miller School distributes them Friday afternoon. The cost to us to do this program is $22,500
For the year.
So, when you talk about the town helping, that's great. But
Doesn't quite cover Miller.
doesn't even cover the Miller School program. That's a new program. So we really got to up our fundraising game, obviously. And my understanding is that the middle school doesn't have any program like this. The high school does, but the middle school doesn't. I don't know if that's true or not. I haven't talked to anybody there.
Aren't there programs for breakfasts and
They have programs during the week. There's programs, all kinds of
who
programs.
funds that?
The feds and the state, mostly. But these weekend programs, there's no funding for them. And you can't I tried reaching out to a number of grant applications. They're like, yeah, we support the federal programs, but not the independent programs like this. So essentially we have to raise the Waldoboro Food Pantry needs to raise an additional $22,500 just to cover this program. But at Miller School, so imagine this, on this program, about 1 in every 3 kids participate.
Wow.
1 in every 3.
What about summer food?
There's programs, and I'm not really, I'm kind of the fundraising guy I don't really, but there's programs out there for summer meals for the kids.
Okay.
What's the van that drives around?
Meals on Wheels.
No, it's not meals, it's somebody's,
Don't worry about it.
anyways. There's programs out there for summer food as well.
Okay.
And the pantry's still there, so we're still providing food to families. Right. Okay, and so that's kind of big news for the pantry. The other thing is, are you going to talk about the 250-year anniversary?
You can go ahead if you want.
So everybody knows that it's the 250th year of anniversary, I guess, of Waldoboro birthday.
People starting to live here.
People started living here 250 years. It's kind of amazing. Like
Yeah.
there aren't a lot of towns that could say that. And there's all kinds of events. There's all kinds of, if you're on Facebook, you'll see all kinds of things that are going on. Saturday's kind of the big day, the parade and Waldoboro Days and all that kind of stuff. So that'll be kind of exciting, but at least I wanted to point out that that's coming. And I think that's this 17th is the Saturday, and there's stuff on the 18th as well. It looks like there might be, but I'm not sure about that.
I think it's supposed to be a whole weekend.
A weekend deal, right?
And
Yeah.
there's a bean supper at the Broad Bay Congo Church on the Friday, evening, the 16th.
Awesome.
16th.
Well, there's something going on at Waldo too.
Yes.
Something at
exactly.
Waldo.
Yeah.
Friday.
All right, and I think that's all I have. Did everybody get a chance to read the minutes? If we could get a
Move to accept them.
Second.
second discussion? All in favor? Can't tell if Jen's hand. Yep.
Jen.
There it is. Okay.
I couldn't find the reactions that fast, sorry.
We're waiting for you. And oh, I went out of sequence there. Well, anyways, so that takes us to town updates.
All right, so first planning board. Let's see, we last met in April apparently, so what's happened since then? I believe. I'm honestly just trying to remember. I don't think anything's really been approved since April, because I think the 80 Gray and bed and breakfast were done for the April 18th meeting. Well, if not, Volunteers of America Senior Housing Project over at 80 Gray was approved. There's a condition that they have to come back for one more planning board approval for the final design of the building. And the bed and breakfast, they were approved for up to 5 rooms and to start their wine bar. So,
Awesome.
Well, could you summarize what the AD Gray process, they're gonna tear it down and build up a building that the planning board likes,
that's
all at their expense?
they got a community development block grant to help with the remediation and then the demolition of the building. Yeah,
But it's not any taxpayer money.
That is
It's-
taxpayer money.
yeah, community development block grants, federal funding type of, but it's not the town of Waldeboro is not giving any money.
It doesn't directly affect ours.
Since then, I don't think there's been anything. There was a subdivision pre-application, but that's about it. And for June, there is going to be one application for someone who is going to propose an apartment, or I think 2 apartments, and an Elber buying station behind Bear Hill. So it has to come to the planning board just because it's a commercial operation that's in the shoreline zone. Other than that, that's, I believe, takes out the planning board items.
When is that meeting?
That meeting is gonna be this Thursday, 6 p.m. And then for town warrant, we are just waiting to see what happens. People can go online to the voter guide to see all the warrant articles, as well as a brief little summary for some of these items that are on the ballot. One of them is the aquaculture item for the moratorium. We discussed it at the last meeting as well. And right now, we have to wait and see if the moratorium even passes before we get this type of aquaculture committee that's going forward. We also,
I still want to talk about it a little bit with George here, but we'll wait till
yeah,
we get to old business.
okay, so old business as well.
Makes sense, right?
Part of the town warrant is the TIF amendments. I held the public hearing that was advertised in the paper. No one came.
You were here.
Yeah, I was here. That's all that mattered. You know, and I waited for the full 1.5 hours, I think, that I said it was gonna be. Yeah,
Good
just in
man.
case, just in case. If anyone does have any questions about it, they can always contact me and ask for a copy of the draft. Draft should also be available at town clerk's desk in case someone needs it. And I think that's about it, unless anyone has a question for the town warrant items.
I don't have a question, but I do have a point. I realized as I was voting, which took forever,
There's a lot in there.
A lot of stuff.
bless their hearts. That nobody was running for positions on the utility committee.
Yep.
Well, I worked for Central Maine Power for 3 years. I've been involved with people who were investing in broadband and things like that. So I wrote myself in.
Oh,
Anybody
nice.
wants to write me in, I would look less stupid than if I ended up on the utility committee, having been voted by myself.
But that would be the majority of the write-in.
Yeah,
That would be kind of the best story.
yeah, it would be a funny story, but
Happy to do that.
That
I'm just
office
saying
one
it'd be
vote.
great.
yeah, right, exactly. That's an essay. But I wanted to say, if anybody felt like, gee, I don't know anybody who knows anything who would be any good on the committee, I think I might at least be able to ask 1 or 2 questions. Which, as you guys know from last time, is sort of what I excel at.
It's useful.
Ann Lehman, Leamon.
It was once explained to me that it's much more important to get the right question than the right answer. Because if you have the right question, the answer will be easy. The answer will be self-evident once you get the real question.
Yeah, and sometimes if you just ask a question somebody else will say, well, what do you mean by that? And so you can build a better question based on other people's contributions.
Do we have the TIF district on there this year? Like, weren't we gonna modify it? Is
Yeah.
Does that make
That
it?
was the public hearing and everything that I did, and it is on the warrant.
Okay,
I
good.
can't remember which one it is, but it has all the amendments so that it would remove Sylvania, Hoss's house and Hanford property for now, so that we can put it in November. And it will amend all the project cost items so that
And when does that, if the town votes for that, when do we actually start collecting those?
the change would have happened based on this past April.
Okay, good.
So Daryl,
So we would accrue some,
so the changes should have immediately. So if we say yes to it, the changes should impact what we're gonna collect this year.
yeah, okay, good.
And then in November, we'll do the change again, put it back in, taking effect next April so that we
Right.
don't have this mess, or so I'm told.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions for the town warrant? Or planning board? Or general town questions in general? I don't think I had any other town updates from that. Yeah, last night.
So.
Yep.
Thank you. Broadband?
Broadband. So we've been up to some stuff since we last talked. We've gone back and forth. I'll start with LCI Fiber Network. The select board and LCI have negotiated a memorandum of understanding, which went through a couple of changes, and that should be signed at the next select board meeting. The changes weren't anything drastic. The short version is we're asking them to get us a cost on a fiber network that reaches every address in town. It's a modern fiber network. We named this specific technology, which is called XGS-PON, which is just if you're building a new fiber optic internet, if you're consolidated or whoever, that's what you use. They'll deliver the same speeds as everyone around us. That tech will scale it to 10 gig if you're wondering about that. There's asterisks and everything as usual, but the core technology is there, which means it would age really well. So the whole purpose of that is to complete the engineering, to get us a price tag, so we can then apply for more bonds or more grants or put something on the ballot or whatever we're gonna do. But we need that number to ask our next set of intelligent questions. After that, I've been talking with the Maine Connectivity Authority. I go to their meetings every week, and I'm learning about the next round of BEAD funding. BEAD funding is, those are grants that cover high cost builds. So if you have a road with 20 homes, that's considered a pretty cost effective investment. That ISP will get their money pretty quickly. The high cost areas are a mile long road with 6 houses that might not all sign up, but we still want to get them connected. That's the digital equity piece of this. So Storer Mountain specifically is what I'm focused on, but I'm talking with LCI and I've let the other ISPs know that, hey, we want your attention for the next round of BEAD. The reason we're asking any ISP is the BEAD funding for those roads is different. Whatever that road is close to is what we would want to get funding to connect to. Storer is an easy example because fiber crosses their front road. There are probably, and I don't have them memorized, but I'm sure there are other addresses that are 2 and 3 homes that might be close to cable or something like that. Some kind of wireline connection. We're not talking about cellular. We're not talking about fixed wireless because there's challenges there. And they don't get, there are rules that prevent them from qualifying for that. So it needs to be one of those.
It's got to be hardwired to the property.
It does, yeah. That's not saying the other technologies are necessarily bad, but there are good reasons for that to be in there. On Thursday, I'm going to Augusta to the House of Flags, the Hall of Flags, to meet with Senator Remy and some other people. They've got a 4-hour block where the Maine Connectivity Authority is going to have tables and stuff set up, and you can meet different people. So we'll chat with a bunch of different people there. Senator Remy, because she's our person. What else do I have? I guess those are the highlights. Those are the major things I've been up to. I'm also doing some for work at Maine Health and telehealth. I've been sharing a lot of the GIS maps for cellular coverage, and we're starting up work on some pretty. I'd love to talk in detail, but I can't. There's some really cool ideas about providing better care using broadband or using future broadband. So this all folds into that as well.
I don't know if this is relevant or not, but do we know what the mix of current providers is in Waldeboro? Like,
So As far as meaningful connectivity, it's LCI fiber network where they exist, and it's Charter Spectrum. Those are the two technologies that can deliver, they can deliver at least 25x3, which is the FCC standard, or more importantly, 100x10, which is what everyone expects to see as the upcoming standard. Both of those companies will also be able to deliver at least a gig synchronous within 2 years because of upgrades they're both doing. Cable's doing a bunch of upgrades on their radio spectrum and their network equipment. And then the fiber stuff will go faster than that. One of the reasons we're still pursuing getting a fiber built everywhere that's beyond getting everyone connected. If you only have cable, you're gonna pay about $100 a month, no matter who you are, for data at rack rate. We're ignoring promotions or whatever. If you go anywhere, if you go to Rockland where 2 of those people exist on the pole, even if you don't want to switch, the effect is you bring down everyone's cost.
Yeah.
So we want to get people back to $50, $60 internet, which is still a lot of money, but it's $40 less than 100. I checked the math on that twice.
Competition is a wonderful thing.
That same competition is why, so the upgrade Spectrum's doing, they were sitting on their hands until more fiber started to go in.
Yeah,
If we want to see those upgrades even from that carrier hit here, it's important that we have that other thing coming. Those technologies push each other. It's sort of an ecosystem.
but do we know what, as a percentage, how many internet users are going with LCI and how many are going with Spectrum?
I think we would see that from the study.
Well, okay, here's the answer to that question. That data is attainable. It is probably not publicly shareable because then you're talking about take rates per individual ISP. So, if Spectrum came and built out, you said, hey, how many live internet users do you have? They wouldn't want to tell us that. If they made it public, someone else could hear that and know what they want to go after. I can tell you the closest thing I can give you to a useful answer, at least from fiber, is most fiber carriers that go in, if they get a really good take rate, it's about 40%.
Okay,
Some people, when they're comfortable, they stay with what they have. I get it. If your internet shows you the cat videos and whatever you want, and you can afford it, not everyone wants to look into changing.
well, and Spectrum's smart because they'll throw in cell phones and.
Oh, yeah, I'm mindful of the Spectrum.
They bundle that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. That it?
That's all I
All
got.
right, great, thank you.
Great.
So it takes us to old business. So I wanted to, so George, I wanted to get your input on this. So one of the things, there's this moratorium coming up on the Potomac for, I guess, how would we say, like other aquaculture? Or I'm not sure how the wording.
About the language that was on the ballot.
Yeah, but I'm really not concerned, but I'm wondering if it makes sense that the town of Waldeboro has a committee that looks at aquaculture on the Potomac as a whole versus having like a clamor group and
My sense is that, and I'm not going to pretend I know everything about this, but the permitting process now is pretty darn rigorous with Department of Marine Resources. Clams are in a kind of unique category because they're managed not by DMR, but by local people who have clam plans. My sense is that the stopping of this moratorium is the word. Yes, the moratorium is going to create more confusion than resolution because there's already a pretty elaborate permitting process where they take into account all of the same things. So I think this could end up being a lawyer's festival and just with no real fruit.
So I guess my original question 2 months ago was, is the purpose to protect the clamors on the Potomac? Is that essentially why we would do this? And how does that impact a business like yours?
Well, it doesn't have any effect on us because we're not shoreside.
What does that mean?
We're not on the shore. We're offshore, we're land-based. I don't think land-based aquaculture, that's a good question. I don't think the moratorium has anything to do with land-based aquaculture.
No, this is just the river itself.
Yeah. And I don't know. I don't know how much I can say or even can say with confidence, but it's worth looking at who's funding the effort to answer your.
Always, always.
Yeah, no, seriously, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not who you would think, from what I understand.
And would you think it's a good idea for us to have the town of Waldeboro to have a separate committee to look at these sorts of things?
I think it's just gets to be a territory, who's,
Battle?
yeah, I don't, because DMR has been doing it forever and is the mandated legal permitting agency for what can be done on a river. And they have very involved process and hearings, and if you don't like the idea, then you have a chance to say it. I don't think it's a good idea, because I think it just is going to make lawyers rich.
Hmm.
And I don't think it'll have any meaningful outcome effect on what actually happens on the river.
So if I was a big corporation and I wanted to build a salmon farm, somewhere on the Madomic, and the town of Waldeboro said, oh, you can't, we have this moratorium, then they could actually say, well, you don't have the authority to do that.
That's
whatever.
the flip side of.
That's how all ordinances kind of work when you get to it's like LD 2003. If they don't delay, if we don't delay the housing, if the state doesn't delay the housing rules being implemented by this time, and we don't have these rules that now say, oh, you can have these number of houses and undeveloped lots and everything, someone's going to come along, say, well, I want to build 4 houses in this undeveloped lot in the village. The town either agrees to it, even though we don't have it on the books, and then someone sues us because our ordinance isn't up to date, or we deny them and then they sue us because, and then the person decides to sue us because the state says all this. So that's kind of what this, that's what I get.
Yeah, well, the specifics of this are that it has never been within the town's domain to do the permitting of aquaculture efforts. It's the town doesn't own the mud. It's a nightmare, and as you may know, I've been involved in the case to reestablish that the people of the state of Maine own the intertidal zone, which adds another layer of confusion to this, because anyway,
The court case might go in your favor then.
yes, it's going to. But, anyway, I would say can of worms, but that understates it.
And Nan's kind of had her hand up.
Well, because I am kind of curious about this whole permitting business. There's a fellow who is near our part of the Madomic, where we live on Madomic, runs what we call the seaweed snorkeler. It's a boat that has this massive vacuum cleaner that goes along and harvests seaweed. And I talked to him about it at one point. I was quite curious about it. He said, oh yeah, I only come by every 4 years, make sure everything is time to go back. And I got it, I was wondering how in the world is he making a living if he sort of snorkels this particular part of the Madomic and only comes to our part of the shoreline every 4 years. And what does one do if one says, you're over harvesting?
I know something about that.
That would be great.
We don't have one of those harvesters.
Mhm.
The company I used to work for has a couple of them. I saw a truckload of seaweed go by my house on Dutch Neck at supper. There's 3,500 miles of coastline on the coast or so. The seaweed does grow back about every 2 to 3 years. Those harvesters leave most of the plant. It's kind of like grazing. So the first answer to your question is, how does he make a living? Well, he has enough at the end of the day to sell it to the company that dehydrates it, and they're in business for 40, 50 years up in Winslow's Mills. The ecological significance of the activity, it actually makes the seaweed grow better. It comes back thicker. It doesn't, there's studies done by independent groups. There's a write-up in the Maine Biz of a couple months ago. There's a study done by it was called CRASSH. If you Google CRASSH, it's a group that did a study on the regrowth and the character of the regrowth. So yes, no, I'm in the seaweed processing business, but we don't use one of those machines. And there's a lot of seaweed. Mother Nature tears off about 40% of it every year.
Mhm.
The total of the commercial harvesting is about 2 to 3% per year. So Mother Nature's doing a whole lot more, and harvesting ideally is going after the big plants before Mother Nature tears them off.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure if I answered your question or just gave my speech, but
Well, you gave me some definitely helpful information, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
What's it used for, George? I'm assuming that's your next question.
well, it's interesting.
I was going to move on because I don't want to hold up the meeting anymore with my own dumb questions.
The products that we make are extracts that you use in agriculture. And the Farm Bill and all kinds of fertilizer agencies have come to realize after all these years of us blogging this project that it has real significance when you have bad growing conditions because of climate change. So we are part of that solution.
I came from Gloucester, Mass, where we had Neptune's Harvest.
Yes,
Yeah.
we buy and sell to them.
Oh, great.
I know them well.
I figured you might.
But yes, it makes crops grow better. Your yield is not wiped out because it got hot.
So ecologically wonderful business.
It
Exactly.
really is. I mean, not everyone thinks we're the good guys, but we're kind of the good guys.
So Jan, do you have any other questions on the aquaculture topic?
I don't. So we also had on old business housing. And I'm not sure where we go, but I just want to keep it kind of on the table, which is we have a housing crisis. In fact, I'll give you another great little example. So I had a chat 2 weeks ago with the gentleman who bought Friendship School, the two gentlemen who bought Friendship
Yeah,
School.
Mr. Wong.
Terrific people, terrific. And their comment to me was, man, we're having a really hard time finding a place to live while we work on Friendship School. And they ended up, I guess, getting a room somewhere in Warren or like,
It's crazy.
you can't get an apartment in Waldeboro. Nope.
No.
Oh, we couldn't, when we were trying to find a place to live here while we were building our place, we ended up living in Falmouth.
Yeah, no, they found an apartment in Warren.
That's where it was, right? Yeah. So, boy, a real challenge is housing in Waldeboro. And, I don't know what the answer is. I think, the reduction of some of the requirements on lot size would be helpful. I'm not sure who goes out and builds brand new buildings to rent. 'Cause that's a challenge as well, but we're the Economic Development Committee, and if people that actually want to come into our town and help develop a business can't find a place to live, that's a problem for our committee, which is what can we do to relieve some, and I don't know what we can do, but I want to talk about it. So
Just because I thought it was so ironic, one of the last meetings I was at, one of the agenda items was how important it is to get high-speed internet to all the houses so that people can do their job from home. Both my sons can do their work on the internet. Which means that the value of the properties go up because you can be a professional something or other because of the internet.
Mhm.
The next agenda item was, how can we get the price of housing down? And it's
catch 22.
yeah,
I do think that one of the things that's mentioned in that, very comprehensive PowerPoint that came up this morning, you sent it, right, Patty?
Yeah, it's the county did that.
Oh, okay, was, ADUs and the ability to do smaller, higher density stuff, building. And my husband is involved with Habitat for Humanity and doing their critical home repair stuff. And, just going in and not talking about people who don't have homes. This is going in and fixing the kitchen floor that is non-existent kind of thing. It's
Yeah.
sort of, how do we make this house remotely more habitable than it was? And so whether it's, I think one of the points that they made in that report, which I thought was very useful, was a question of communication and the importance in letting people know that it's something the town's aware of, that the town's working on, and efforts to, that And minimum lot sizes, reducing minimum lot sizes, and many people get all up in arms. Oh my God, we can't possibly have smaller lot sizes. I'll be breathing down my neighbor's neck, or my neighbor will be breathing down mine. And to start helping people understand the importance of having greater housing density, particularly in areas that are transportation hubs. Should we get some kind of a countywide bus service or something like that?
We've talked about that in the past, having some kind of bus.
Sonia has her hand up.
I
Yes.
have to point out the obvious. Take a good look at Chicago and Los Angeles. They've got postage stamps lot that people are paying $1 million to live in. So I don't think saying higher density is the answer either. But it's like you don't come, I don't know, my only main thing is you don't want to come up with what sounds like a good plan without really knowing what it's affecting. When I looked at that housing PowerPoint, that's not our main issue. What's causing the housing shortage is a lack of opportunities. That we're losing population. It's becoming a bedroom community in a weird way because it's retirement income. They've got money, they're coming from out of state, they can pay cash for this house, so they don't need to worry about a mortgage. A lot of these retirees, they don't want noise, they don't want development because they want that pretty pristine coast. We're in a vice in this area on coastal Maine because of that. We're tied in between conservationists, retirees, and not enough businesses or individuals who actually live and function in this community. It's a dying economy. If you look for the types of employment that are available, if you look at that PowerPoint, most people are employed in education, they're employed at the hospital, or they are employed, what is it, in service industry or retail. That's it. Retail doesn't pay. Okay, and you can't make a businessman pay him more money when he doesn't have the business. We don't have the population here for population density. We really don't, because it's a summer community. Come winter, everything dies out. And so, my only thing, I'm thinking if you're going to try and tackle it, you're going to try and free up apartments again. You're going to severely limit the existence of these bed and breakfasts, because this is an ideal opportunity from people out of state who've got a little extra cash to buy a home on the coast and live a good life and rent out rooms to pay for it. Because if you look at prices of hotels in Camden, they're $2, $3, $4 million. That there's that beautiful place on Clark Island, and it's called the Clark Island Inn. Old place. They're very famous for their lunches. Okay, but it's old, it's like the old iron bedstead. Their bathroom isn't in the room, but they sold that place for like $8 million. But you can't get a mortgage for $8 million. So you got to come up with cash up front, and you have to be able to generate the business. So most times when people buy something like that, it's bringing them some income, and they invest their retirement, funds from their golden parachute or what have you into that. And then, and a lot of them will own property down in the islands for the summer, and they go down there for the winter. And then they come back up here in the summer. That's the issue. Because Rockland used to have almost everybody had an apartment in Rockland because it was extra income for just about everybody who was there. But then along comes the bed and breakfast and the Airbnbs, and people can buy, and they can buy the hotel room instead of staying at a hotel. Hotels are suffering because they can't compete with some of those prices that the Airbnbs and the type of service. So that's your kind of issue right there. My own, yeah, but but it's one of the things that are causing the problem. How you fix it, the only one I can think is more
I think
restrictive.
what they were saying in that report is it's not one thing that's caused it.
Yeah.
It's been a calamity of things, and now we're in
Yeah.
the perfect storm, and it's
Yeah.
blown up, and
Yeah,
but that's the Airbnb's a big
Yeah.
part of it.
yeah,
But we've talked about how to drive more business here, and it is trying to find housing because, as we talked about
Yeah.
just before the meeting. If you can't find somewhere to live, you can't work here. You don't want to bring a business here because you can't find employees. So that's that whole
The
circle.
I moved here in the 70s because I wanted to move here from Connecticut because of how it is here.
Yeah.
I'm not the only one who did that then and since. But the free market approach to this has failed because the value what people are willing to pay to be here is whatever, there's no limit.
Yeah.
And so that means that anybody who just wants to live here and have a job that's can be meaningfully above minimum wage can't afford to buy a house here or live here or rent here because of the appeal of the area. And I don't know if there's any, I suppose we could make it less appealing, but that would be kind of hard. But I don't know what, but the point is, that there's gonna have to be some very deliberate step that offsets or overrides what normal free enterprise would do, including bed and breakfast.
So I know Anne, you had your hand up and Jen has her hand up. Patty, do you mind just briefly, just in case someone's watching the recording and wondering what this study is, do you mind just briefly saying what the study was?
The county did a housing needs assessment for the whole county, Lincoln County.
Lincoln County.
Lincoln County Housing Needs Assessment. There's a link to it on their website,
And I'll put it up on the
Yep,
town wall.
and it's a very extensive report. I want to say it's over 300 pages, lots of data. And they touch on all of this. And I'll also add in, when the Genesis people were here, they've got a bunch of data that really gets into all of the things that have kind of brought us to where we are right now. Yeah, so the report's out there.
Yes, Jen.
One of the things that was in the report that is very interesting is that in the 10 years from 2000 to 2010, the county collectively built over 2,000 homes. And then in the years from 2010 to 2020, it was just several hundred new homes that were built. And that was an interesting piece of data that I found as well, among all the other reasons for this problem. But it was interesting. It takes time. I've gotten through 70 of the 130 pages of the report so far and looked at the data. But it's information that we'll be talking about for a long time, I think. It's a good eye-opener for everybody who lives here so that we understand what's really going on down there in the weeds of everything.
Jen, do they make any recommendations?
They do at the end. I'm not there yet.
Okay, all right.
Don't spoil the
Sorry.
One of the bottom lines was the economy is suffering and is going to continue to suffer until we have the housing for the workforce. Because we
Totally,
have
I
an
think that's
aging
right.
population here.
And I think that's exactly right.
We're the oldest state there is,
Waldeboro specifically has the oldest population in the county.
really. No, I saw in the
I'm
Today
pretty
Show,
sure you can check with that, Jen. There's some,
the average
I know
age,
there was a chart there.
the only
You mean
state,
in the county? Talking
In
about,
our county, Waldeboro has
Yeah.
the oldest population.
I think
I don't know if we have the oldest, but anyway, there's a lot of information
They
here.
might be
We're
close.
up there, at least.
running anyhow.
We
We're in
are,
the
We're in the running.
Fair
We're in the
enough.
running.
yeah.
It's a slow run.
Yeah.
All right, Jen, did you have anything else?
No, I just thought that, I think it's worthwhile to take some time, anybody who's interested in housing, and just go through this. I think we're gonna be revisiting it for discussions and conversations all along, and simply that if we don't have housing for staff and businesses, businesses cannot grow and maybe cannot operate. And I think that's the most immediate, never mind homelessness, but that is an immediate issue. So,
You know, and it's interesting that we looked at, being able to develop some commercial space at one point when we looked at the land up off of Route 1.
Yeah.
And, the reality is that you could do that and find space for new businesses, but where in the world are those folks going to live? And so it's
What they did back in the forties and fifties is they built company housing.
Rooming house.
Like I remember Atlanta, Georgia, a town of Marietta, half of it was built by Lockheed and they had these little duplexes.
Yeah,
Nice little places
Yeah.
with built in as 2 bedroom with a fire thing and stuff. And like in other days, people could live on the property. They'd have an apartment, there's things like that.
That's
Someone,
what horses are trying to do over in Thomaston now. But they're at that point.
yeah,
And Ann's had her hand up for quite some
Yes.
time.
Well, and I just wanted to say, I think to me, it's very important that perhaps we continue to think about housing, that housing stays on the agenda. Perhaps at some point, we would want to have a meeting that we simply devote to housing, because it is, it's not just Airbnbs, it's not just retirees, it's not just any one thing, it's a whole combination of things. And what is it that we as an economic development committee can do to make any sort of difference? Because it's one of these things that I got a newsletter from Home, the Orland Group, Homemakers Organized for More Employment, a little picture of a rock that someone had found in Bucksport that had a painted rock that said, "Start somewhere." And I thought, yeah, I mean, none of us has the answers, but we're all smart people and we care. And so it kind of indicates that with attention and goodwill and this great information from both Genesis and the county, maybe there's something we can start to think about, some
even
thread.
to whittle it down to what kind of housing.
Yeah.
Do we need?
Well, one of the things, I don't know if it's in here or not. I can look at it, but buy a sheet of plywood. A sheet of plywood is like 6 times what it was 5
We
years
bought
ago.
a house, we built a house
Yeah.
last year. Hello.
Yeah, and you know
Yeah.
perfectly well that one of the reasons a sheet of plywood is that expensive is the amount of it that's being put on windows and putting houses back right side up after the weather.
Yeah.
In other parts of the country.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's gotta be driving it. So what I was gonna say is, if your husband's involved in Habitat for Humanity, there's probably some much less expensive ways to get residential space.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is.
3D printing, baby.
That, if I was out in the tornado belt, I would have an underground house.
Yeah.
I mean,
So,
no question.
But I like the idea that we continue to talk about it every session, and maybe we'll get some momentum and actually make some recommendations or actually have an impact.
Is there anything about the effect of,
Housing in the minor zones thing.
yes,
Not exactly, but there's 1 or 2 parts that I probably can touch on for that.
only because that, I don't know this. But I think it. You can't blow these houses down as many times as they're being blown down without needing more plywood the next day. And plywood is a finite thing.
and it's burning up in Canada.
Yeah, right, yeah, that's a good point.
All right, and so that's it for old business. Anything else?
Well, the only other thing I was gonna say for housing is, I mentioned LD 2003 earlier, and that's the one where. Towns are gonna be required by the state to have, allow certain number of. Dwelling units on undeveloped lots in the growth area and all these other changes that. A lot of towns are not gonna be prepared for in July 1st, Waldeboro being one of them. The state is looking at potentially extending the deadline so that Waldeboro would have another year to implement these rules. If we get that, then my hope is that the planning board will be able to implement those rules by this November. We're pretty on top of it, actually, when it comes to most of these things. We allow housing in pretty much all areas except the industrial zone. Sorry, George.
Thank you.
We allow accessory apartments in all areas of single family dwellings are allowed. We allow duplexes also in the same thing, so it's not like anyone can. So wherever single family housing is allowed, you can pretty much do duplexes or even multifamilies, I think, in most areas. And even our lot sizes, if if you're pretty much in the downtown, if you're in the historic or the downtown districts, there is no lot size limit. You can build as many units as you want down there.
Hmm.
So, Jen, when can we expect that?
You're
building?
looking at my 2 acres, aren't you?
There's like a few changes that we have to make, but that can all be done ever. And
Under old business, I don't know if it's actually on the agenda, but on Channel 6 last week, there was on their 207 show, there was a segment on the eel business. Which was very interesting, shows the inside of their building. Yeah, I can send a link to you if you want to see it, but it's very interesting.
That'd be great.
I'd like to see that.
Same.
I
I'll
love
send
how
it,
things work.
I'll send you the link. Thanks.
Did it cover our local business?
Not mine.
No, but, oh,
American Union,
Yeah, it showed Delano's where he had it on his shelf up there. And they're shipping that stuff all over the country.
stuff.
The news, and it's really unfortunate. I can't think what his name is, but the news guy who did the interview. Wasn't really anybody who liked fish. So she gave him this beautifully prepared piece of smoked eel, whatever it was. And his reaction was, it's not too bad, it's kind of fishy.
it's a little oily.
Supposed to be.
It's a little bit oil.
Yeah, how do you react to that?
Anyway. And the best thing about the smoked fish eel was that you couldn't taste the fish.
Oh, smoked eel can be amazing.
It is, I think you can get it right up at Delano's.
I think so too. The last time I was there.
Well, we can do a field trip after this.
Absolutely.
All right, so it takes us to new business and away you go.
Yeah, and I'll try and do as much as we can, because we're gonna go over 8 o'clock.
That's fine.
That's
So the Maine Climate Resiliency Partnership, the program for the Governor's Office of Policy and Innovative Future, or GOPIP. And it's a program they started about 2 years ago, I think. Just focusing on how towns can start addressing climate resiliency and sustainability. And it's a 2-part process where towns will start by passing a resolution, and I'll get to that at the very end of it. Pretty much having a staff or designated committee that would focus on these types of programs, and then town can then apply for some grant funding to help address some of these strategies or similar items. For the town, I've already discussed this with the select board and had a brief workshop where I went over all these items with who was in attendance. Part of it is just the town getting an assessment put together, and then the select board on the 27th, I think, will potentially look at a resolution so that we can apply for grant funding in July. So I'll go through these strategies. Everyone should have a copy of it, and Jen, you should have a copy of it on your computer. Just for everyone's information, if it's yellow, that's something that was considered a high priority. And if it's green, it's something that is considered complete. This isn't really fun, and just because it's a low priority or medium priority or high priority now, doesn't change that you can still work on some of these things later on. It's more guidance than anything. So strategy A is talking about transportation. This is just what the town can do to try and improve our resiliency on transportation. So purchasing electric vehicles for like police department or any municipal individual, installing EV charging stations, adopting ordinances to encourage EV infrastructure.
Whose assessment is this? I'm sorry.
Fine.
Okay.
Adopting an anti-idling ordinance, increasing public transportation or alternative transportation systems, telework policies, dense development within zoning, adopting a complete street policy, a broadband plan, and encouraging carpooling. So, well, carpooling for municipal officials. The ones that are a high priority are that I thought were the public transportation and alternative transportation. Because we're already going to be talking about village partnership and trying to rework something in the village area specifically. Like the downtown Friendship Road, trying to get more biking and pedestrian walkways down there so that not, and we've also done the public transportation study poorly at around the time to COVID was just starting up. And there was a lot of public interest at that time, actually. I think there was a 40% interest in looking more into public transportation. We just had to stop all conversations at that point. And with the railroad eventually getting to Rockland, that would be something we can tie in. And then the other two are the complete streets. I mentioned the village partnership with UOT, the broadband plan. We're working on that right now. So it's,
Can I comment on, and this might have been something you were thinking about, install EV chargers in public areas. I've got a family in South Portland that's within walking distance of a public free plug-in. And they have 2 electric vehicles. It's a chicken and the egg case. Without a doubt, there's a chicken and the egg in that line.
yeah, no, and that was something, and Sonia, I did see your hand up, but I'm question first. It's difficult because I believe there's gonna be one installed next to the public professional building on Jefferson Street that the town's not gonna own. So we don't know if that's going to be something that's gonna get this huge traffic, and I also live in Damerscott. I go to the DV charging station there from time to time. Sometimes it's busy, sometimes it's not. As you say, it's a chicken and the egg thing.
Yeah.
We were looking at installing like 2 or 4 chargers when there was the last round of grants. And it was a bit of an expensive feat as well. And I was asked, are you confident that there's going to be people who go to Waldeboro downtown instead of Damerscotta's or Thomason's, where there are charging stations as well? And I kind of shrugged at the idea, like, I don't know if I can confidently say that.
There's another layer to this, and that's at this stage. I'm driving a plug-in hybrid, which I plug into my own garage every night, and then I get 50 miles of it.
Mhm.
So yeah, I don't need a station because every morning it's got 50 miles built into it.
Yep.
Um,
No, this would be for people traveling on the.
yeah, so the point, that's my point, is that if someone's deciding where to have lunch on their way to Acadia, and we have a charging station that they can know about that.
But you gotta be walking distance to
The downtown.
that lunch. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Across the street from Moody's. There you go.
You know what? That crossed my mind.
Yeah,
So that was it for the transportation item, and a lot of the focus I have when I was doing this assessment is what's something that we do need a little more work and discussion on, and what's something that is administrative and probably doesn't need to be focused on too much by the town. So that was it for the transportation item.
We just take the
Sure.
adopt a complete streets policy. You said that's like bike lanes and things like that.
Yeah, similar to the alternative transportation. Yeah.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, we have bikes, we can never take them out.
I
It's
mean,
like, take your life into your hands.
When we moved in and, had we have 6 bikes between the 2 of us, and people say, you ride bikes? We said, well, yeah. I said, well, not here, We do, but we don't, it's for exercise, and it's early mornings, and certainly not during fisherman rush hour, things like that. Because on, Friendship Street, definitely not for one's health.
Yeah. No, and it's funny because I walk early in the morning and it's like the Shel Silverstein book. I get to the end of the sidewalk on the way to Sylvania, and I turn around and come back. So it's like, stay where the sidewalks are.
And so none of these are implemented, they're just ideas.
They're
essential talking
just a current
points.
assessment, right?
Yep.
And all the assessment is what leads to the resolution that the select board's gonna look at on the 27th.
All right, got it.
I'm gonna try and go through as soon as fast as I can, so you can all, Sonia, you had a question?
No, that one I just wanted to know what the complete street policy was.
And I'll try and go through the strategy quickly, so you all have time to ask us your questions. Strategy B, modernizing Maine's buildings. It's pretty much as it sounds, making the municipal buildings, schools, and encouraging more energy efficient structures that are being built. And installing like heat pumps and VRF systems, bringing the streetlights, which we've already done, hooray. And especially hooray when you look at CMP bills.
oh, yeah, that was a solid move.
and supporting professional development for CEOs, adopting a commercial pace ordinance. So the town has the residential version of it, which is if someone wants to make these energy efficiency upgrades to their homes, like putting on solar panels or installing all these things, it would be sort of a loan program where they would just apply through efficiency main, I believe. And the CPACE is for commercial buildings. I have the ordinance ready. I just missed the deadline for June. So this is hopefully something we'll have ready for November. But the other high priorities, making the municipal building and school buildings energy efficient. It's always been discussed. It's just never been put on paper. Upgrading to efficient interior lighting. We always talk about that. I didn't know too much on the efficient appliances. I'm old school where it's you use it until it's not usable anymore. And then there's heat pumps, VRF systems. We always talk about trying to fix these HVAC systems. And then this one comes up quite a bit, but it's prioritizing main forest products and construction projects.
Hmm.
And this is somewhat what I wanted to bring up when you brought up plywood and all that stuff. It always depends on the projects. I think we always want something that's more cost effective and both short term and long term. And if plywood's time is expensive, and if it's the same amount from the New Hampshire business, or if it's more expensive from the main business, but you know, the costs are different and the New Hampshire one's less expensive and it's the same product, I assume we would still go with the New Hampshire one, even if it's the same product. That's just me.
Can you give me an example of that? Because I can't think of how I would know
Prioritizing.
that it was a
main-
main piece of wood.
We would,
I know how I know because we did it in our house. You ask.
yeah. And if we put out an RFP, we would put something in the line saying. Show evidence that this is a main product that you're using.
It's become actually, for some people, it's a competitive differentiator. You know, because as you're saying, you know, a piece of plywood is a piece of plywood. Well, this one has 50% main product in it. Our decking is a main made product called Duralife. And you know, we looked at
Composite material.
composite,
Yeah.
yeah,
How do you like that?
it's great. What's nice is that it's got a little ridges on it so that when it gets wet, it doesn't immediately, you know, end you on your butt. And it's relatively cool in the sun. Yes, of course, it's only been installed for a year, but
Fair.
you know, we've liked it fine. And it was price competitive. It might have been a tiny bit more than Trex, but we wanted very much to support the main industries, especially our relatively new one. I mean, and some of them you can't tell, but a lot of them, if you ask, they'll, you know, dig into it. You can find out.
Did you go to like a different kind of lumber yard for that? I mean, would Lowe's or Home Depot know?
We got it from a lot of our stuff came from Hancock.
Yeah, so local,
Uh,
like a more local
Yeah.
lumber store. Yeah,
Good operation over there.
yeah,
that makes sense.
Well, Robbins Lumber is right over in Searsmont. They're making lumber. I don't know if they're doing plywood.
We're not the lumber shop in downtown Waldeboro.
Store.
Yeah, store, yeah.
oh, yeah, they're great. We got a lot of stuff from them.
So beyond that, then we get into like energy efficiency, building codes and requiring EV charging and solar readiness for new construction, which considering we were talking about the housing crunch just a moment ago.
Yeah.
I put those as low priority, but I think it could be knocked up to a higher priority if we can balance some incentives with it. Like, for example, if it's a multi-family, we usually require like 2 parking spaces per unit or something. But, you know, if they say, oh, well, we put in an EV charging station can be 1 per dwelling unit, and that would probably be acceptable, because then we have EV charging stations and we aren't getting rid of the housing crunch. Any other questions on the modernizing main buildings? Then there's strategy C, a lot of it's complete already. The only 2 items that aren't really complete, tracking emissions and adopting resolution to reduce emissions. I just have that as a low priority because, I mean, I don't know why we would track we already know the electric vehicles in town. We get the solar panel permits and I don't know where, if we get the heat pump rebates. But I don't see a point, if I'm being honest. And then adopt a resolution to reduce emissions.
Is, we've got some solar panels up at the business park and there seemed to be bottleneck in solar installations because CMP didn't have what it needed to receive the power. Is that, did I understand that
Yeah,
wrong?
substations get at capacity.
Whatever it was, I don't remember the details.
That's
but-
usually the thing that, because I think the Sylvania committee was thinking of having a solar farm on that area. And when we've talked to CMP and all the other solar developers in the area, they say would that be great. Too bad the substation's at capacity. And that's why we can't do any more.
So,
projects.
well, but is there anything the town can do towards taking that roadblock down?
Paying CMP to upgrade the substation.
And not to bring up politics, but there's this whole other thing in the power realm of power buying. I have no idea what it all means.
I don't know how that might impact it. So, and
Yeah,
Go to Europe.
what I mean, there's usually a way to suddenly make Central Maine Power think that something that they thought was completely impossible yesterday might be something that's at least worth studying, which would be talking to the PUC about it. And that if we were to, I have not researched any of this, so I all I'm doing is saying it seems like if CMP is putting another spanner in the effort to create, to reduce climate change, reduce emissions by saying, oh, we don't have enough stuff, not enough, large enough tube in the, pipe in the substation. I mean, come on, guys.
I-
So you have to put in another chunk of panels. Let's get with it, because how much is that going to cost relative to bringing in more oil or building another generating facility?
I mean, the only thing I could think is that CMP must have a requirement that renewables can't exceed a percentage of the substation. So if you've got a 10 MVA substation and maybe they say we can't have any more than 2% renewables connected to that. So whatever the number is.
yeah, because I think it's.
Because there's no way on earth that the substation can't handle another solar plant.
I mean, they don't make money on
Right.
my solar panels.
Right, I think they limit how much you can connect to their because essentially you're another power source.
Right.
You're IP.
A competitor.
You're like, you're like the nuclear plant down the road, bringing power to that substation.
I don't know. I would suggest invite an electrician or someone from CMP to explain the complexities of the electrical power grid. I think that was that practical engineering show, that guy was describing how they transfer and move this electricity. It's a very, very dangerous, very balanced system. So they may have some more practical reasons for that. And I don't care if it's environmental or not,
It
but
is something associated where if the grid goes down, like we got the big power outage. The solar is still gonna try and get to the substation.
yeah, but it's how it feeds into the system, because I remember learning
That's-
from wind industry, that power goes up and down depending on the speed of the wind.
Right.
It blows out these transfer stations because it fluctuates too much. I don't know, if you don't want to do politics, ask them how their system works. I'm sure they've got a PR guy that could come in and, explain some of the stuff. Not, if we're talking about economic development, right? Should we not investigate some of these options as to what yeses and
I
nos?
have talked to. them
Oh,
about
yeah,
it.
okay.
That's why I'm saying, like, the whole point is the solar gets to this, all has to get to this transfer substation here. And then it gets to go out. So if there's some disconnect where the substation goes down or the lines just can't get the power to keep going, they can't hold all the power that's gonna come into here forever. That's the gist of what I was told from them. Because I had to research this whole thing for the Sylvania committee, I think a year ago, when they wanted to do the exact same thing. And it was CMP told me that, Revision then told me that, and then Sundog Solar, who did the transfer station solar. They all told me that same story, and it was like, okay, that's 3 different sources. I think I'm gonna call it there
Here's a review. That's great.
Where is the substation that we would have connected to? Do you know?
on Route 1 here.
Right above the bank.
And I'm only aware of one substation in the area that might have upgraded when there was this demand for solar, and that's the one going on in Warren right now for that 600-acre solar farm. So if anyone wants to build a 600-acre solar farm in Waldeboro, you can get it done.
Bigger transformer.
Is there a place where you can get data on what the capacity of a given substation is?
We'd have to pay CMP $300 for a pre-application.
Okay.
Again, I've had to ask them this.
Oh, I believe you. I can believe you and not like
Well,
the.
actually, no, and I think, actually, I'll take that back. CMP charges me all the time. I think you could just ask revision as well.
Okay, I've already called them.
Back to the resiliency items. Things we've already done. Assessing municipal electrical needs, we already look at our electric bill when we are doing the solar farm. Adopting renewable energy ordinance will allow renewable energy and storage, as well as streamlining the permitting process. We kind of do that already. We don't have a special ordinance for it, but we have the CEO approving personal solar farms. Just through simple building permit process, and the commercial ones go through the planning board process, but we allow all those uses. And then installing renewable energy projects at the municipal properties and power purchase agreement. That was done back in 2017. Moving on to strategy B, growing jobs, the resource industry. This is mostly just focusing on adopting local food production and consumption policies. Focusing on main projects for RFPs and other construction projects. Assessing suitability of privately owned brownfield sites for clean energy projects, which solar farm companies are already doing. Creating incentives for clean energy businesses to move to Waldeboro and encouraging clean energy industries in economic plans. I don't have any of those as high priorities because I don't feel we are treating them any differently. I don't see why we should be treating them that many differently. Everyone gets a fair shot in Waldeboro, and I mean, for the local food production, community gardens, it all really depends on the location. You know, I think the town office used to have a community garden here, still could do a community garden, and it's having the farmers market here as well. I think the village might be a place where a community garden could be, but really it's all about what people want to have these types of things. Any questions on that? Then going on to strategy B, protecting the environment. The high priorities I have here are updating the watershed plan to identify flooding and developing an inventory of natural resources and habitats. And this is more benefit for planning boards. We always have to do this for beginning with habitat for any development. We always have to consider beginning with habitat, floodplains. So it's always good to have those updated.
Max, I have a quick question on
Yes.
the developing the inventory. Is that something Midcoast would already have some data on?
It might be. There's always different resources. And sometimes it's just getting federal, state, nonprofit, and then just whatever local information there is all in one
Okay.
spot.
I was wondering about the Conservation Commission, whether they have something.
The Waldeboro Conservation Commission,
Yeah.
they are disbanded.
Oh. I guess we didn't need any more conservation.
No, it was just always hard to have members.
Uh,
Nobody would drive. Sorry.
On gas. The one completed item is the soil protection program. We have a well head protection article. And everything else is focused on conservation and prioritizing sensitive areas. Which most of this looks like it just involve amending shoreland zone. And others just involve partnerships and should we identify correct areas.
I don't think we have any areas that are going to be vulnerable as water levels rise, but do we? I mean, we're not Miami. Is there any shore properties, any shoreline that's got big areas that are vulnerable to higher tides?
I think the only area that's close to the water would probably be the downtown, but with water. It doesn't really rise too much there. It's other than flooding, but that's it.
I mean, it's, you have to come up a steep hill from Freddie's Stores to,
Yeah, no, and that's why I say they're not really focused there.
Actually, the area over by Hannaford, where at the intersection at Route 1,
That flooded.
that
That's
floods
right,
all the
that's right,
time.
Yeah.
So it's only
Yeah.
gonna get worse.
That water was like, man, it was almost almost breaching the bridge.
it did touch the bridge for a
Oh,
while.
it did touch,
Yeah.
yeah,
And Route 235 went bye-bye.
yeah.
Yeah.
So any questions on protecting the environment? Part one of strategy, right? Building healthy and resilient. This is updating our flood, most of these are updating the flood insurance program so that we can reduce insurance premiums for those who may be in the flood zones. The other two high priorities I have, community assessment, identifying ways to reduce risk and vulnerabilities, which I think the storm plan just showed us what a lot of these spots would be. And then developing an early warning system evaluation plan. That's a high priority, but I think it's actually, we have the code red system so that residents who do sign into it or are just given a more local notification when there's an emergency going on.
I have a question, Max, which is this whole flood insurance program. I just read an article about how in California, two of the biggest flood insurance or disaster insurance providers, home insurance providers have pulled out because there's been a cap on the rates they were allowed to charge, and so they haven't been able to make any money.
Mhm.
For
Yeah.
fires, I think, right?
That was for fires, yeah.
Yeah.
In Florida, however, it's for flooding,
Yeah.
and they're doing the same thing. And I don't know whether there was a cap there. But that the whole point of a national flood insurance program is essentially to distort the market and encourage people to build in places where they shouldn't build because, oh, well, now I can afford the flood insurance.
Backwards.
I realize this also, then we have housing question. So I understand that this, you've got economic rationality and then we've got wanting people to have homes. But I'm less excited about placing high priorities on participating in the National Flood Insurance Program, when what that means is my taxes go up to support somebody who's building in a place that they shouldn't, to be really blunt about it. Sorry.
No, that's, I was trying to figure what the question was, and you just asked it, because I heard that same news story. Can an insurance company with all the regulating departments of insurance companies are regulated?
Yeah.
And yet they can just leave?
I think,
Well,
yeah.
part of Part of- Well, part of this would be amending our current floodplain management ordinance so that it's actually a lot more restrictive.
Okay,
So. And there's actually not that many spots in town that
Yeah.
are in the flood zone, but we can certainly. Just have this updated so that, like, for resource protection in shoreline zones, for example. It's done in a way so that if you can build, if you have a parcel that the resource protection runs through and you say, well, I want to build in the resource protection just because I want to be as close as I can to the water. The shoreline zone says, well. Fine, but if you have a developable area anywhere else on that land, you can't build in the resource protection map. So we can do similar things with the flood insurance ones,
oh,
saying
got it.
if you have, an area you could put a tiny home on,
Yeah.
so that you can make your residence there. That's what you should have instead of trying to build your McMansion in the floodplain zone.
Okay. So I think there's just some wording here that may be a little confusing.
Yeah, that's just the strategies and action items that are set on the checklist, and I've made a note just saying that. If we're doing it, we're making sure that we're very strict on what's actually being built there.
Okay.
Sonia, did you had your
Well, I
hand up?
just remembered a lot of the ordinances recently, just 5, 6, maybe 10 years ago, we had to adopt all the new floodplain ordinances that were developed by the federals, and it's all part of the planning thing. And so it caused, in South Thomaston, it caused a lot of increased property taxes because they weren't in a flood zone before they were. So they had to purchase insurance. So that was like,
I think it was just updated again.
oh, great.
I don't know, I remember in my talks with Harpswell, they wanted me to try and do a mapping to get them out of the flood zone. It's like, I don't think that's how I do my job.
Great question.
So any other questions on, well, there's another page for strategy, yeah.
Continued.
The other high priorities requiring, considering sea level rise projects when permitting on coastal developments. I actually get this question quite a bit when we're talking about shoreline zoning applications, so. That's something I have to consider a high priority.
Mm.
Identifying and planning to reduce public health threats. And developing and implementing extreme temperature emergency plans. Town office has been used for an emergency shelter in the past for extreme temperatures, so. Of course, we want to try and have that so we don't have people always here. Increasing education on prevention of mosquito and tick-borne diseases. It's main, I feel like we have to make this a priority. And then there's peer-to-peer check-in programs and adopting requirements in special flood hazard areas and sea level rise projections, though they don't have as high priority, but they could be considered when we have a direct partner. And we already do have the low impact design standards for stormwater management that was back in 2020. Does anyone have any questions on build healthy and resilient? And then two more, hopefully we'll be fast. Invest in infrastructure. Again, vulnerability assessment and critical infrastructure, culverts and utilities. We gotta have that as a high priority because we saw what happened. And improving water and wastewater treatment facilities to reduce damage from extreme weather, high priority because of the pump station that's down on Elm Street goes out. Yeah. I don't think we want to taste the clams after that.
Yeah.
We've also completed adopting DEP street crossing standards and applying for funding. We just got a grant for the Elm Street culvert, ironically, and assessing wastewater treatment for clean energy. I talked with John Fancy, who used to run the facility on Union Road. He said it's not feasible because we'd have to extend three-phase power up there, so it's kind of unfortunate, but well,
On the culverts. When I saw, well, at the entrance to the business park and on 235, I've seen in my own real estate where if a culvert isn't big enough or if it's got sticks across the entrance to it, it's a disaster. It washes out around it. I have no idea what the condition of our culverts are or how they've been sized, but bigger is better if we're going to face rainstorms like we had recently. And if there isn't a route test, I'm standing like I'm in the highway department, but there needs to be a very rigorous. Are there any sticks in the entrance to this culvert? Or have beavers plugged it up or something? Because I think that's what I've got to believe about 235. There was some culverts that just were overwhelmed.
and that's what this strategy item would call for, that
Yeah.
we get some funding so that we can do an assessment of all, or just getting Public Works to assess all the culverts in the area and see what it would take for it to be adequately funded.
As soon as the culvert's not big enough or it's plugged up, the water goes around it and then the road's gone. Yep.
I got the same problem even with a sewer grate or storm sewer grate. That all the leaves and
Yeah, they plug it up.
sand and dirt wash down and completely cover it. And then the water just runs around it.
Yeah.
Or it runs through my yard, but
A few years ago, the railroad trimmed like they just did actually along the tracks and all the little chips and sticks plugged up a culvert. Pretty soon I had this much water running through a rope factory.
Yeah.
Just poured right in.
Any other items for the invest in infrastructure? Last strategy, and then we'll get to the resolution part, engaging with new people. The only high priority I have on there is amplifying public health advisories. But it ties into the code red system and peer-to-peer reviews. We do have a very vulnerable population, and we want to make sure that if there is extreme temperature, if there is dangerous conditions, we don't want people out. Probably best to make sure that we are very active in that type of communication.
Right, and the challenge there is that while you do have some vulnerable people like my mother who are very tech savvy. You have other people like my father who doesn't have a cell phone. And even though he does, he wouldn't charge it if he did.
I like it.
Right. And that's part of the priority there. We can put up a Facebook post and it's gonna get people who are on Facebook. But then we have the code red system that would hopefully get people who give us the phone number so that they get that. But then some people don't have the phone. We get that. So things like that. And then the rest of it is getting an official committee of stakeholders, getting education, all these education programs, and creating it. Well, the last two items, I had Jen in mind, with Business Association, creating and supporting energy reduction campaign among businesses, then initiating bulk purchasing to provide low-cost equipment to interested residents and businesses. I think that latter one, Portland did once, where it was just a bulk purchase of heat pumps. And that's something that could be pursued, then it's something that we would just have to put together at the local level.
It's challenging too, because you have to have the heat pump sized
Yeah.
correctly, which means you have to have a good model. And it can be a little difficult. We have heat pumps on our house, and some of the models that are available in the area are out of date and acknowledged to be out of date by all the people who use them. And yet we had model outputs for our house ranging from 12,000 BTUs to 90,000 BTUs. So it's hard to figure out the right amount of equipment you need to use, it's simply an ancillary. It's not that it's a bad idea, it's an ancillary thing to have in mind.
Are there any questions on the engaging young people strategy? So then that leads us to the last page, which is priorities for resolution. This is the doc, and I'm sorry for the text change selection here, but this is what on a white piece of paper with black text.
Would say,
Right.
It's gonna be presented to the select board and it's going to outline 6 priority items, which is gonna try and go through all the different strategies. Reducing gas emissions with a focus on non-vehicular travel in the village. Reducing the municipalities' energy use and non-renewable fueling sources. Amend ordinances to consider rising sea levels, natural habitats, and creating incentives to encourage efficient and/or renewable infrastructure. Strengthen Waldboro's response to natural disasters and extreme temperatures that impact vulnerable residents. 5 is preserving the water quality of the Medina River and protecting traditional aquaculture practices as well as public access. 6 is creating infrastructure and networks to help minimize the impacts of climate change in the short and long term. So that's the gist of it. Now, the resolution would give, and I just put it on there as a placeholder unless it all changes, but I said that the town planner would be the one who overall signs and be project manager involved in it, rather than having Julie have something else on her plate again. But I believe Bob suggested at the select board meeting when initially talked about this, maybe have the EDC as the sort of advisory group so that I'm still reporting to you like what I'm doing for the town updates and everything, and you all discuss it, or if you want to have a subcommittee to discuss these types of things, that's an option as well, in case you want to focus on housing for some topics, some days you want to focus on the climate resiliency. But I didn't know if anyone had thoughts on that, if this is something you do want. For things like the ordinances, we'd probably have someone from the planning board maybe attend the meeting to give their thoughts on it, or I'd work with the planning board and they would have someone come here. Or it would just be creating a different committee so that someone here can be part of it, someone from the planning board can be part of it, and then just get some more interested individuals to be that group.
it seems like a small leap to associate these discussions with economic development. It seems like they're so close that it's a logical thing that I certainly would love to be able to stick my nose into these things, even if you don't ask me to do any work. But I don't like the word traditional in front of aquaculture, but that's minor.
I think it's having a one-line recommendation to implementing something's a quantum leap, so I think it makes sense that we would want to maybe be involved in some aspect of it.
Okay. Well. I would say I'm gonna put forward the resolution for the select board on the 27th. And I might try and do a workshop later this month for what the potential grant would be for our first one. I'm thinking maybe to help buy the solar farm up to the transfer station. That's gonna depend on how the town warrant goes, because one of the warrant articles is buying the solar farm that's up there. Right now, we have a power purchase agreement. We have the opportunity to buy the solar farm now for about $160,000. So if the town votes yes on that, what's down 82,000 now, we can try and get a grant to help reduce the second half of that payment, so that we're reducing the buyback period. Now, it'll probably just be a separate workshop that I'm sure you're all aware of.
Yeah, can I ask a question on the blue on blue here?
Yeah.
When you use the phrase public access, are you talking about roads that go to the shore, or are you talking about what you do after you're in the mud?
Thank you. I had a question on.
I don't know what access, I do know what access means to me. I bet public access has two distinctly different connotations depending on who you're talking to. So I wonder which one you meant.
Like we have Dutch Neck Marine Park and Pine Street Landing, so people can get to the
So
water.
it's land that remains available for people to reach the shore. Has
Well-
nothing to do with what you do when you get there.
Well, and then we also have, like, in the shoreland zoning articles, this is a state item saying, if you want to build like a ramp or a dock or something in the water, you have to have it verified by the Shellfish Warden or the Shellfish Committee that they're not potentially viable flats or anything, unless it's going to be a commercial area.
So but it's still, it's access is still about getting there, not what you do when you're there. I'm thinking about seaweed harvesting specifically.
Right, it's more about just freely moving
Yeah.
into and around the Monongahela.
The decision to commit some resources or some thought to keeping those access roads available.
Right.
Okay, good. That's the right answer.
Well, we should, one other thing to, are you done, George?
Yes.
One other really quick item, so the Supreme Court made a ruling on defining wetlands. Were you aware of that?
No,
I believe, yeah, I heard it, yeah.
what did they say?
So this was an individual, and I can relate to this. This was an individual in Colorado that wanted to build a house and brought in fill to fill up their property to build a house. And DEP came in and said, you can't, because next to your house is this little puddle of water that drains into a stream, that drains into something else that eventually gets to a pond, a lake.
Yeah, sure.
And the Supreme Court ruled, interestingly enough, no, that's not wetlands, and he can build. And what they said was, you can't call a puddle wetlands, and yet DEP can today. I mean, the
Well,
way it's written,
when we weren't allowed to do something up here,
this is why I'm bringing it up.
Good.
Because it could impact us. What Supreme Court ruled, that in order to be called wetlands, it has to have direct link to the water that you're protecting. So the lake or the ocean or whatever, year round. So it has to be a visible connection.
Oh, so it doesn't protect vernal pools.
Oh.
That's
Okay.
a
Well, it-
problem.
what the flip side of the vernal pool question is up on the property of the park. Generations ago, somebody ran a skidder across the hill. And every one of those tire marks is always full of water.
Wetlands.
Wetland, yeah, because a skidder went sideways on the hill.
I've heard those fights.
So when we were building our camp, we had the exact same thing. We had this little plot of wet property. There was a drainage pipe from the other side of the street,
Yeah.
brought all the rain and runoff onto our side, and it didn't connect to the pond. You could walk the shore of the pond
Yeah.
all the way around it. But it was low and it was wet. And so they determined it was wetland.
There's also a definition for a creek, I think. It has to have gravel on the bottom. Like if it's just a grassy wet spot. In terms of how far you can put a building
Yeah,
away from it. If it's got a gravel bed, that's a different category than if it's just grass living there. Yeah, so that's Supreme Court. Well, isn't that?
it's a
something?
Supreme Court ruling.
Oh, that'll be interesting as this plays out.
So it's interesting because when we were talking about wetlands on that piece of property that we were thinking of developing.
Hmm.
We have to go back and look at that and see if maybe this changes that.
Well, there were a few other problems with that, like the ledge to get up there.
Explosives.
Yep.
Problem solved. You're welcome.
You can tell that there's no peepers on the Supreme Court.
Well,
Those little peeper
Well,
things.
Super frogs.
moving on.
All that
from-
noise. when you
Oh,
fly
the
upon
frogs.
it.
Anything else?
No, that's it. You have the comments from the committee and then.
Any comments?
I've commented enough.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Meeting adjourned.
Thanks.